But like if I'm because I love going the elite quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. I think they're even getting
Really?
discounted this year. Yeah, I mean, I just think they're like Josh Allen. Why you don't like for me? It's just
Hell
I
no, I'm not
understand that there's
sure.
quarterbacks later, but like Josh Allen, past 4 years averaging every
I mean,
single year 24 points per game. Like
yeah, he's the QB1, but there's 5 of those guys this year that could be QB1. 5.
but what I will say is how I look at the quarterback position. I think that you're paying a premium for elite guys, right? And you got Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, then you got
Mhm.
Lamar, and you got who I
Anthony
understand people are
Richardson, Pat Mahomes.
Pat Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
Like those are guys that have proven they can average 25 fantasy points per game. They've done it. And those are your different, like we were talking earlier in the show, you want difference makers. And those guys, when they're having their years, are absolute difference makers at the quarterback position that can win you championships. We've
Right.
seen it. Like I love Anthony Richardson, but what if he's, Justin Fields-esque, which Justin Fields was really good. Don't get me wrong when he was on, but is the passing going to be good? We don't know. But I will say I love the potential. Absolutely love it. Another guy, I think Kyler is going,
Kyler too,
seventh
man.
round
Dak.
that I love. Dak, but like here's the problem where I run into with the quarterbacks is like when you talk about CJ Stroud, what the hell is the difference between CJ Stroud and Dak Prescott?
They're the
Like
same player.
exactly, but one of them goes 4 rounds earlier. Now I don't like going CJ Stroud at all, but like Jalen Hurts, I'm very confident quarterback 1 and quarterback 2 over the past 2 years in fantasy points per game. I'm confident that he can be 22 fantasy points plus. I feel good about that. Rather than, do I think Anthony Richardson could get there? Absolutely. Does he get there? I don't know. Or do I go with like Dak Prescott? He's going to be like career year 20 fantasy points per game. Can he get up to 25, which we've seen Jalen Hurts at? Is kind of the question. So I just like those elite guys.
I hear you. Here's where I'm at with the elite guys, right? You're taking them what, third, fourth round in redraft, fourth, fifth, I'm assuming third, fourth round. You're getting those guys right around like Cooper Kupp range, Stephon Diggs range, Alvin Kamara. We talked about that. Joe Mixon range, right? And the drop off between, say now I decide I'm going to wait on quarterback, and in a 12-team league, I end up with Brock Purdy in one of the last rounds. I end up with Trevor Lawrence in one of the last rounds. I end up with a Justin Herbert in one of the last rounds of Tua Tagovailoa. I feel like I can get 25 point to 20 point upside any given week out of those guys. There's the difference in quarterback to me, potential wise, isn't really there outside of showing us consistency when it comes to like Josh Allen or it comes to Lamar, Jalen Hurts. We know the consistency's been there with those guys. The other guys are just Jordan Love's been the top, he was top 8 last year. Brock Purdy was top 6 last year. Dak Prescott was top 3 last year. Kirk Cousins has been a top 10 quarterback. Jared Goff's been a top 10 quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has top 5 upside to me when he's healthy and playing a full season. Justin Herbert's been a top 5 guy. I'm like, to me, there's 25 upside with a lot of these quarterbacks that are going later. So I'll take the guy, the Joe Mixon, the Alvin Kamara over later when you're in your 11th, 12th, 13th round, and I got to decide coin flip between Ezekiel Elliott or some of these other guys that are down there. That's when I'm taking my quarterback.
So what I'll push back on this is this. Like, to me, I don't think Brock Purdy, like I think what we saw to Brock Purdy, maybe it gets better. I just feel like that offense was operating at such a high level. Like, can they even go up from there? Maybe. But like Brock Purdy offers no rushing upside. He only had 188 yards rushing last year. Is he mobile? Sure. But it's just last year he was at 19 fantasy points per game. And once again, we're going back. Like, one of the most important things, and you talk about it, and I love it because I think it's the most important thing for fantasy football, is you want true difference makers. All right. You want difference makers.
Yes.
All right. I don't think that there's a big difference between like Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. Like, really, there's not. And now the problem that I run into is like, all right, we're looking for difference makers. Now, maybe Alvin Kamara, like you said, I don't think that's a bad pick. But like Joe Mixon, what's the cap? What's the cap on Joe Mixon? What's his ceiling? Do we think that
top 5 to 8?
And once again, like I know we don't want to talk about fantasy points. It's not per game, but like at the quarterback position, I do think it's important in other spots for guys who play a full season, because we've seen Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes play a full season. And these are guys that are averaging that have the ceiling to average 25 fantasy points. We've seen that for a full season. So like those are absolute Same with Lamar Jackson. We've seen him
Right.
average 25 fantasy points per game for a full season. So like where does it go up with Joe Mixon? Like, does he get to 17 fantasy points per game? That's Brees Hall last year. Do we think that he can get to 20 plus fantasy points per game and be it elite? That's an absolute league winner at the position. Do we think that he can truly get to that range? Because what I look at is like, I don't think that he can ever, like, I'm looking at it back in RB1, high in RB2, which is really solid. But who's going to win me leagues more? Is it going to be him or is Patrick Mahomes? Because I think Patrick Mahomes is going to bounce back in a big way this year. I
Right.
look at that receiving core. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think that he can lead the NFL in passing touchdowns and average 25 fantasy points per game, which he's done multiple years. Is he going to win me fantasy leagues? Right. Like I look at it that way. And then you kind of talk about later in the draft. If I'm waiting on quarterback, like my strategy this year is I get Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar, because those are the guys that I think can get this year. When I look at it, I think those guys can be 25 points per game guys. Now, do they actually do it? I don't know, but I think that they can get there. If I'm not, then I'm waiting on Justin Herbert, who is so severely discounted this year because one, he burned people last year, but also like everybody's looking at the receiving core and it's like, it's not very good. But he's also shown that he could be 24 points per game kind of guy.
Yep.
He's done it already. He's done it. And the other guy that you talked about is Trevor Lawrence. Like
Man.
he's so severely discounted that if I don't get one of those elite guys, I'm not even taking Dak. I love Dak, and I think Dak can probably repeat what he can do last year. But why am I taking Dak Prescott in the 8th round when I can get Trevor Lawrence in 13, Justin Herbert in 12, and where Dak's currently going, I can take a shot on who's going around him. Maybe Najee Harris gets hurt. You got Jalen Warren. Jalen Warren can be a league winning. I don't want to say league winning, but where
Yeah.
he's currently going. Or Trey Benson. James Conner goes down. Fucking Trey Benson looks so good. So I agree with you in that sense. It's just I want the true difference makers at quarterback, and I really think there's only 4. I do think A-Rich could potentially be one, but you are paying a premium price for him. Same with Kyler Murray. I think that he could potentially be one. He's a little bit later. Otherwise, I'm just waiting on those guys. That's how I look
I
at it.
mean, I'm gonna be real with you. Like Dak, I know you don't like Dak. Dak showed those weeks, so he was a top 3 option last year. I don't know if he got to 20, what was it, 23, 22 points per game last year for Dak. I don't
He
know what
got to
exactly
20.
he got to.
He
So he got to 20 last
20.7.
year. Jordan Love was up there too, and he got better over the second half of the year. So I know
Yeah.
Jordan Love's an option. I know there was weeks where Tua was averaging over 20 fantasy points. I know that capped off in the second half there. So I just think there's too many options for me to be like, yo, I have to go for one of these guys. If Lamar we've seen Lamar be hurt in the past. We've seen Patrick Mahomes. He was a QB, 11 last year, I want to say. Some back end QB1 option last year. You got guys like Joe Burrow who are still there. We've seen Joe Burrow be over 20 fantasy points. Like, to me, there's just way too many options at the back end of your draft to be like, I gotta go with early quarterback. I just think you could find better draft capital there at a positional player in PPR leagues, especially.
No, and I get that with some players. I like the security because you don't have to say, well, hopefully this is a year that he does average 20 fantasy points per game because it might not happen. The other guys are just, I'd be shocked if Patrick Mahomes this year doesn't average over 20 fantasy points per game. I would be shocked.
Yeah,
You can maybe talk yourself in Josh Allen just because of receiving court, but like I look at Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and I think there's only one other quarterback. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks that can have over 10 rushing touchdowns this year. There's no other like people say Lamar. Lamar's never done it. Lamar's only had 7. Anthony Richardson's the only other quarterback. But you are playing. Why am I going to take A-Rich when Jalen Hurts going in the 4th round a lot and A-Rich going in the 5th? So why would I take that shot on Anthony Richardson, who I feel like is basically Jalen Hurts when Jalen Hurts has already done it? And you can say, well, A-Rich has really good. I mean, who has better receiving core than possibly Jalen Hurts? With 15 rushing touchdown upside, what's he showed us last year?
Well, new offense. Is Kellen Moore going to do the same thing?
Yeah, no, I agree.
You got to worry about with him.
There's some risk, but like, who are there? If I said there's 3 quarterbacks that have 10 rushing touchdowns this year, I mean, you're going to say
Allen,
Hurts is one of them.
Richardson,
right?
Hurts, yeah.
Yeah. So I just look at like stability there, and I just feel very confident. So that's why, like, I understand what you're saying. It does drop off quite a bit, but if you're going to draft, let's say you're wide receiver 2 in that range and draft, I don't know, Jalen Waddle, who's currently going around Jalen Hurts. who Jalen Waddle last year was 14 fantasy points per game, or Devontae Smith, who was 14 fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
Jayden Reed was 14 fantasy points per game, and you're getting them in 6. So like, I just look at like the stability there at quarterback. That's how I do it. But yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't know.
We
It's
talk
just
about this
it's
all
tough. I get you. It's tough for me because I'm like, when I look at what's available in that range, right? And it depends obviously on your league size. But if I'm taking like a Jalen Hurts, why wouldn't I just get like a Cooper Cup? To me, I'm like, all right, let me just get Cooper Cup
because he's
instead.
toast.
You could think he's toast, but he had a roll. He had a roll last year, right?
No, I don't think he's toast. I
But
think that he'll be.
you know what I'm
solid. I
saying?
think he'll be
Like,
okay. Yeah.
there's that upside there. So I look at that. I'm like, can I get? Maybe I'm not taking a Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith because I think they are limited in their role. But if I can find a player that I think is of value down there, now I'm like, all right, I'd rather get potentially a second round pick in the fourth round than Jalen Hurts. Like that's how I'm trying to.
No, and I
value
understand that 100%. I like, once again, it just comes down to roster build, how you like to build out your roster, and I like to have the guys that I don't need to worry about matchup.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about them hitting. I already know they're going to hit because they've done it for so long and at such a high level. So I